Darrell Torres, welcome to the Preconstruction podcast.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. Well, listen, we were having a good chit chat offline there, but let's jump into it. The listeners and the people watching, anybody that doesn't know you, give us a quick overview.
Yeah, I'll give you the brief synopsis, if you will. So I've got 20 years of experience in the industry. Started 20 years ago working for a local general contractor in Denver, Colorado, really learned the industry there. Before that, I was in the operations side of commercial real estate, learning kind of the ins and outs of buildings, how mechanical systems and electrical systems work, and what areas can be modified and so forth, and then moved into that opportunity with a local general contractor. Made a couple moves along the way, and here I am now in Southern California in the LA office for Clark Construction as an executive, working on projects all up and down the West Coast for us. I partnered with architects in Seattle. I pursued projects in San Francisco, Los Angeles, obviously, Orange County, in San Diego in that role.
Very good, very good. Well, let's go back. How important was those early days on the operations side, learning the ins and outs and the real small details within a building?
Yeah, that really is invaluable, and there's a lot of different ways to gain that experience. Some folks would take a more traditional path than I did with a college education, as many of our hires do, and we bring them into the office, and then we look for those opportunities to get them a rotational turn out in the field, and then give them the choice. Would they like to be in operations, or would they like to join us on the front end? But getting that experience is invaluable, to take it from being more of an intellectual exercise, if you will, to understanding really the constructability and having ideas that you can also challenge your design partners with, to kind of foster the partnership with them and come up with a solution that's not only affordable, but thoughtful and meets the objectives of the end user.
Yeah, because it really is. I mean, I believe that there's definitely a happy medium with both. Obviously, the traditional education, but more importantly, the guys that have been on the trade, started as a carpenter, started even as a laborer, worked their way up. Those guys have got a lot more of an understanding of what goes into an estimate or a bid, that I think you almost need one of them in a 5-man team.
Yeah, no, well said. And reminds me of recently sitting in our project office in San Diego, was going over some analytics and data with one of our project engineers, and he asked me where I got my MBA at. And I said, well, what would I tell you if I didn't have a college education? He said, I'd say you were lying. And I said, well, honestly, that's the truth. And this is what I told him. I said, I would never denigrate or downplay the commitment, financially especially, the hard work, the dedication that it takes to get a degree. That is admirable. That takes a lot of work. But you can't necessarily equate a degree with intellect, right? So taking what you've been given, whether you have that degree or not, and at every opportunity looking for those chances to grow, to learn from the folks around you, to kind of absorb whatever information is put in front of you, to talk with the designers, to understand the owners. I mean, I think that's really what rounds out. So getting that degree certainly is invaluable, but certainly not the only path.
Absolutely. And I think there's a misconception, especially for the guys on the ground, whether it's a carpenter, a joiner, an electrician, whatever it is, they don't see themselves. They would like to see themselves within a GC in a pre-construction manager position, but they think they need a degree, whereas you don't really. As long as you do the fundamentals and you understand it and you grow in a methodical way, then the opportunities are always there.
Yeah, and there are so many opportunities now when you think about, just challenging yourself and learning about things. If I'd stayed static when I got into the industry 20 years ago, I would have been left behind a long time ago, right? So
that's right.
Constantly, I mean, there's so many opportunities, whether it be through the software developers, through your own organization. Clark does a fantastic job of offering online training as well as in-person training to all of us at various levels of our careers. So really, really latching onto those opportunities, because regardless of how you got into the industry, you can't stay static. You've got to kind of train yourself and educate yourself along the way.
Yeah, and it's a big thing now. I mean, with COVID, a lot of the junior, mid, and senior estimators are reaching out to me and saying, "Listen, Gareth, obviously I'm not as busy as it was, or maybe I've been furloughed. What would you
Mhm.
recommend in self-teaching courses, certifications? There's so much out there, but you've got to almost have a path in your head for, right, this is where I want to end up in the next 5 or 10 years. What are the small steps I need to take to get there?" But
Right.
there is.
Yeah, I would agree. And first and foremost, the one thing that I always recommend to our young folks, even my own children, quite frankly, is find something that you're passionate about, right? If you learn about something that interests you already, it really becomes effortless because
That's
you're
right.
just so absorbed in it. So I encourage them to find something. If it's lead, then get involved with you at GBC.
Yeah.
You know, if it's women in construction, we have plenty of folks in YOPS in our office, and you know, that's a fantastic opportunity there. The Urban Land Institute, the Design Build Institute of America. That's one that I just recently, as this COVID stay-at-home orders came down, it's been difficult for me to find time because it was a 3-day course to get DBIA certified, and they started offering the classes online. So I
Brilliant.
recently took that. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's fantastic. So I was able to take that, and now that the testing centers are open again, I can go and start to get test myself to get DBIA certified. So find something that you're passionate about first and foremost, and the opportunities are there.
Good.
LinkedIn Learning is fantastic as well. Clark has purchased that for all of us. So we all have access to LinkedIn
Brilliant.
Learning within the company to tap out into other sources of information.
Yeah. And was it always, you mentioned find that passion, was it always construction for you?
It was, even as a kid. I mean, my dad was so handy, and I was the oldest, so I always ended up going along with dad to fix things or do things. We had some acreage in southern Colorado and built a barn, and just
Nice.
kind of fell in love with it there. My brother is a master electrician. I have a couple master plumbers in the family, so we've
Brilliant.
always been building and putting things together. I often lament that I wasn't more of a craftsman because I see how handy my dad and brother are, and how easily they put things together. And I think I realized early on that maybe my skill set lied a little bit more with the data and thinking about things
I like
and
it.
organizing teams and those sorts of things. But we all find our path at some point.
Absolutely. It sounds as if Torres LLC could be fully integrated.
You never know. I'd have to get them out to the West Coast, Sal, because I'm not going back to the snow.
No, because I'm funny. Denver's one of the hubs at the minute that we've got a lot of
Mhm.
work on. Probably the
Yeah.
three or four is Charlotte, North Carolina, Denver, and Nashville, Tennessee. But Denver, how important? I mean, it sounds as if on the operations side, then the I2 construction for 5, 6 years. It sounds as a perfect kind of path into the interiors. Then from the interiors out into the corn shell. Did you always kind of, when you were in the interior, say, you know what, I can't wait to do my first ground up project?
I didn't initially. It became, very interesting to me as you see cranes going up in the metropolitan area early on. But when I went in, I was green. I remember sitting down with my first set of drawings, and the president of the company at the time, Al Capella, he sat down with me with colored pencils and a scale, and literally showed me how to do a takeoff. Our desks were huge at that time because you had to be able to flip the pages and get through it. And I remember looking at that set of drawings going, how in the world am I going to get through all of this? But you kind of start with those baby steps. And again, if you have a passion for something, if you're hungry, if you want to find other opportunities, it becomes available. And although I outgrew that opportunity, I look at it fondly. Today, I can go back to Denver. I still have obviously all my family there. My wife still does business there and in California. So we get back quite a bit, and I can go sit down and have a beer with any of those guys and reminisce and tell stories about how we came up in the industry.
Good. So how's California? How was that transition? Because I know obviously it's a different kind of market to Denver. It sounds as if now in your current position, you've got a big, big, big area to cover. How difficult is that?
It is and it isn't. I mean, it's all about maintaining perspective and really utilizing the resources that are available to you. So obviously the scale of the projects that I work on here is something I wouldn't have dreamt of 20 years ago. not uncommon to work on something that's $400, $500, $600 million with Clark that, you know, we can take on anything. And that's the exciting thing about it. An arena, a high rise, a student housing project, a hospital, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. I mean, you could just iconic projects that change skylines and the way cities operate and the way people live. So yeah, that in and of itself could be overwhelming, but understanding that you're part of a team and how to structure and empower that team, I think has been the most important tool that I've had to pick up in this transition, because one person couldn't possibly just run with a project of that size in the front end. And so at Clark, we've actually moved away from that term even of pre-construction and restructured our business to have what we call a project development side and a project delivery side. So kind of further blurring the lines between the front end and the actual operations team, so that individuals could kind of flow between those two areas, if you will. So in project development, when I do go to pursue a project, I could have as many as, you know, 10 to 12 project engineers, schedulers, a field super on there working with us on constructability, quality control people, design managers, working on that. So it's understanding what each of those individuals' assignments are, where their strengths are, and then working with them so that I can kind of get a package assembled to then interact with the architect. As really the last 2 years, I've been working exclusively on design build projects. Brilliant. So typically the architect is under us in that type of arrangement, finding that delicate balancing line between not squashing their creative juices, but also beholden to a budget, right? You don't want to be the guy that always says no. So you better have some alternative ideas if those architects are going to want to keep working with you, as opposed to just saying you can't do that. It's like, how about we try this? And then, you know, putting that whole thing together and presenting it to an end user, whether it be LA County or LA Metro or UC Hastings or UCSD, or some of the projects that I've had an opportunity to work on out here.
Brilliant. And it seems as if design build is becoming sexy again. It seems to be becoming back very, very strong. What's the I mean, it sounds as if you've got a passion for design build. Is that your preferred delivery method, and why is it coming back, and why is it so good on especially for the developer, but also yourselves as a GC? So
for the personal side of that, first, I love it. I really enjoy it. And to this day, I still take, you know, my wife and kids, and I say kids, I mean, my son is 25, our daughter is 22, but when they come around and we see a project that I worked on, I still get, to me, the design, what's so neat about the design build is like, that was my idea. Yeah. I told them to move this entrance over here, or they wanted to do this facade this way. And I said, no, let's do this and this. We can still afford it, but you know, you're still going to get the look that you want, sort of a thing. And so they may roll their eyes, but that still excites me to drag them around and show them those things. So yeah, design build I think is really neat because of the opportunity you have to influence the design, and also, quite frankly, make the decisions early on in the process, right? The curve is much different from design bid build, where a lot of those change orders and decisions are generated because you didn't have the constructability reviews, you didn't have the discipline look at the schedule, you didn't look at alternate means and methods because it was kind of all done with just the owner and the designer. So getting to embed ourselves in the process. And the most recent project that I've been working on is at UC San Diego. It's actually a progressive design build. Okay. So the project manager has a seat in our trailer. The architect regularly comes down from Seattle and spends every other week with us. Before we were quarantined, if you will, or locked up. You know, but since then we've utilized things like Zoom and Google Meet and Teams and boy, you name it. We probably all use different platforms, Blue Jeans, to accomplish our work still. But yeah, that really dynamic environment of decisions happening real time, changes being made to affect the outcome earlier as opposed to later.
Yeah, I'm getting that a lot from GCs. They're becoming more agile when it comes to this. I mean, design build progressive sounds like another real good collaborative approach to easing risk management, to making sure the budgets are on time, And listen, if you bring, we always call it the three-legged stool. You've got the architect, the owner, and the general contractor. If we can get them speaking more and collaborating more so that everyone knows exactly where they stand, there's no surprises, no big change orders, it can only be good for the industry. From a GC point of view, there's a lot, and I know you're conscious of not calling it pre-construction, but there's a lot involved in pre-construction, and you know as a pre-construction executive, what would you say is the most important part of your role? Is it the actual numbers, the estimating side, the value engineering, the contracts, the scheduling, the planning and logistics? What would you say is the real core to what you do?
Right, and that's the really neat thing about what we do, is that even in the time that I've been in the industry, in 20 years, the role has become so much more broad.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it just used to be about sitting down with some colored pencils and counting things off and making sure you didn't have any scope gaps, and turning in a proposal to now where we get those opportunities to weigh in on the design or the logistics or the means or the methods of a project. I would say currently for me personally in my role, if I had to boil down to what was the most important, is communication.
Yeah.
Regardless of the hat that I'm wearing, if I'm putting together a conceptual estimate, if I'm working with a design partner, if I'm presenting to an owner or just sitting down and having a conversation with them, is working on not only speaking to them in a fashion that gives them assurance that I know what I'm talking about and that the Clark is a contractor for them, but I often say that we can all pat ourselves on the back almost endlessly with construction talk. Right? we kind of have these terms that we use that we love to impress each other with, but at the end of the day, if it falls on deaf ears, if your audience doesn't understand what you're saying, then it's really of little value. So really understanding who you're speaking with and tailoring your comments to that individual is key. But I didn't start there. Obviously, I started with the nuts and bolts of estimating, and then I learned about scheduling, and then I learned about design. So it's not as if you just can jump in at this level. It really, I liken it to the analogy of a craftsman. Someone doesn't become a master electrician, a master carpenter overnight. Oftentimes they take a very disciplined approach to it through a stewardship, if you will, or an apprenticeship, where they learn parts and pieces of it and then take tests along the way, measure their knowledge until it all comes together. So really, when one of our young people comes into the office, whether it's a new hire or somebody transitioning from the field to the office, I encourage them, members of my team, to find out what drives them. Again, what gets you excited about your job, and let's find the opportunity to get you into that role. We had a young gentleman just a couple years ago. I think we were out of town on a conference, and at that point he was working as a project engineer, and we had him at the beginning stages of doing takeoffs and scoping subcontractors and working directly with our trade community. And him and I were sitting in the back of an Uber or something heading to the airport, and he goes into this 10-minute discussion about data, how he loves the potential of data in construction and what it could do and what it can be leveraged for. And so I encouraged him, let's find an opportunity to pursue that. And so we meet regularly as management, and we talk about our people and the roles that we want to get them in. And Clark has a very active virtual design and construction platform. And we found him the opportunity. Now I walk by his workstation at this, when he's there, again, before COVID, he's been going back and forth between Washington, D.C., Bethesda, Maryland, where our corporate offices are, in California, working with our top minds. And to the point where we now have a new platform, which we call CODA, which stands for Construction Data, that's working towards becoming its own kind of revenue center for Clark. I walked by his workstation. I don't even understand what's happening. He's working with things like algorithms to be able to take a model, regardless of what architectural firm generates it, and decode it intelligently into something standard that we can use in the platform that we use, which is, we're transitioning right now to the Beck Destiny platform, which I know you know those guys. So
yeah, that's it. Stuart Carroll and the boys. Yeah,
exactly. So it's stuff like that I would have never thought was possible, but it all spurred from a conversation that him and I had. Now, it wasn't me solely that put him in that role, but just talking with other managers about it, and and getting him the right opportunities. And now that's what he's doing pretty much full time. And that's pretty cool.
Darrell, that kind of brings me to my next question, the whole data, the destiny which you guys are transitioning to right now. How important is technology becoming in your role, not only your role, but within pre-construction and even operations?
Mm-hmm. No, that is true. And, it's invaluable, quite frankly. But you've heard me talk a bit about that idea of a craftsman. And I like to think that as we've seen our positions evolve over the years, that we really can become a craftsman, if you will, of our trade. And I use the analogy of a true craftsman. Say you were to take a master carpenter and you asked him to build you a cabinet, and you gave him tools that were 10, 12 years old, maybe a little nicked, a little dinged. He'd rework them and he'd put it together, and you'd probably have a fine cabinet. Now, if you took me in and said, here, why don't you build a cabinet? And here is the state-of-the-art tool, CNC machines, everything you need, I could probably put together a pretty decent cabinet.
Yeah.
Conversely, if you take that craftsman, give him the state-of-the-art tools, and ask him to put together that cabinet for you, now you come up with an heirloom, right? Something that you could perhaps pass on from generation to generation. So while we can accomplish the task at hand with tools that are maybe a little outdated, maybe we've worked a few formulas for ourselves, or we got our little database off in our hip pocket that we use in meetings that are handy, right? Give us the tools that are state of the art, and then, see what the work product ends up being. So it really is a marriage between the two of the technology, as well as, again, getting back to the idea of communication, teaching your people how to present themselves, how to relate to the end user, and you put all of that together, and then you end up with someone that could do something really neat.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love it. And how's the rollout with Destiny and working with the Beck Group? How's it progressing? Are you guys live yet?
We are. So some offices are ahead of others. Obviously spearheaded by our Bethesda, Maryland headquarters. So they're pretty fluent in it, and they're teaching us slow pokes on the West Coast how to catch up with them. But yes, we are in the middle of our beta test of it now, kind of doing it in mirror, if you will, on some example projects, and we fully expect to have it rolled out by the end of the year.
Fantastic, exciting times.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything else that's exciting you when it comes to the pre-construction, maybe the VDC, the BIM side of things? Is there any tool that you like using yourself when it comes to presenting to clients or working with developers?
Yeah, well, Assemble is invaluable, right? We use that quite a bit. We have a dashboard now that we work in conjunction with our department, our VDC department, Virtual Design and Construction, which is located right next to us on our floor. And we embed one of those individuals into every pursuit or project that we're working on. But this dashboard, as soon as we get a model, will generate the quantities for us, right? Especially the big things that we're always looking at verifying, like the cubic yardage of concrete, square footages, and the big check boxes that you can check off, real quickly. So that's made us just that much more nimble, as we all certainly appreciate that the demand for information is a lot more immediate than it used to be. And so, we should be able to accommodate that. And that's we strive to do that.
Good. Now, I know you were involved last week on a panel on the Biz Now with a few developers in the West Coast. How was it? What were the big takeaways, and how do you see us getting back to full steam?
Yeah, so out here in California, we were deemed essential from the get-go. And so the task at hand was, how do we keep construction moving? And really the big question was, regardless of if we were looking at the office or the project site, was just simply, how do we get our people to feel comfortable, right? Because they've got to feel safe if they're going to be able to come to work and be productive. And it really came down to two things, and that was communication and education. So our executive leadership did a fantastic job of communicating the plan, right? And we have two very different environments, obviously, with those working in our project development teams in the office and then the project delivery teams out in the field. But as far as it relates to the project sites themselves, having things like temperature scanning stations set up. And then we found that it's a little easier or less intrusive, if you will, for those gentlemen as they're walking onto the job site to go to a computer station and just verify that they don't have any symptoms, that they haven't been exposed firsthand to someone that has symptoms, that they understand the protocols for the job site, which involve a face mask, 6 feet distancing, making sure that they wipe down anything, you know, that they have access to hand sanitizer and those sorts of things. Then, you know, as you look at even the man lifts, right, we've reduced the capacity on those to where, you know, you're less than half of what you normally would take up. So that has caused us to stagger the start times for a lot of the trades. Our project out at North Torrey Pines Living and Learning at UCSD, we could have as many as 1,000 tradesmen on that job site as we're racing towards completion here in the fall. Massive job.
Wow.
And so, you know, to consider that, to date, we've had 8 cases of the COVID-19 on our job sites. None of them were Clark employees. It was our trade partner or vendor related. But the real success there is that it didn't spread.
Brilliant.
It didn't shut down the job site, right? Because of these protocols, because, hey, wait a minute, your temperature's high, or make sure you got a mask on, or keep the distance, those sorts of things. Now, that doesn't say that it hasn't impacted productivity rates, right? Things have gotten a little slower, but what we've seen to this point is none of our subcontractors have come back and asked for a change order to have to deal with this. So to date, the things that we're doing are reasonable enough, and we're stopping the spread on those job sites to where you know, we're able to kind of honor the contracts that are in place. Now, if they get a little more onerous, the restrictions, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But right now, things are holding pretty steady. And then as it relates to our offices, Irvine in Orange County, our LA office, is really the biggest one on the West Coast. We had all of our managers, we all came back the 1st of June in full force, just so we could get used to the protocols, the directional signage, how to use the break room. We all had our own supplies laid out for us at our desk, even as minute as our own dry erase pens. You know, personal ones, so we weren't exchanging them or just leaving them up at the board. So those sorts of things, that really thoughtful approach to it, making sure we all had masks and sanitizers and things to wipe things down. And then a couple weeks later, we started June 15th welcoming our employees back, but we did so again in a rotational basis. So we keep on Box a spreadsheet, if you will, of that office, all of our offices, where we're monitoring the head count each day. Right, and it's filled out for the month. So we're trying to maintain it at about 50% capacity, right? That way we allow for every other seat, no more than 4 people in a conference room that used to seat 20, sort of thing, so that people feel comfortable. They can feel empowered, get back to work. We can be, and we've proven we can be productive in this environment virtually. But you know, I liken it a little bit to doing your job with your hand behind your back. Right? There's a reason that we have the big offices, the job site trailers, the open floor plates, so that we can look over to one another and go, hey, did you think about this? Because so much of what we do is interconnected and it overlaps. And so I need, you know, the trade manager that's handling drywall to make sure he's communicating with whoever's handling the exterior facade almost, you know, fluidly. So we have had to be a little more disciplined in our approach to collaboration and working around that to make sure that we're covering all the bases, but ultimately we're getting it done just a little bit slower, and we're getting as many people as we can in the office in a safe environment. And that's the most important thing. Yeah. And
listen, slow and safe wins the race at the end of the day. If we blew out a few schedules, and so be it, as long as everyone understands it, as you say, everyone's communicated. And what was the kind of, I'm sure during the BizNow conference, the developers were just hounding you, asking you, right, what's the story? When can I get a decent price? When can we kick on here? What was the general consensus for them? Had they got plans in place?
Yeah, that really is the $1 million question, quite literally, in some cases. Yeah, so almost instantly, I think, once the restrictions were you know, made public and everybody saw work slowing down, we started hearing from owners like, should I rebid this thing? Should I put it on the shelf? How long should I wait? Those sorts of things. I went into a deep dive on understanding the steel and aluminum markets because I had a huge project that was all curtain wall, tons of aluminum. And the owner was thinking, well, hey, aluminum might be coming down. We can maybe save a bunch of money on this. But learning about the Shanghai Exchange in the London Exchange and how metal is traded and those sorts of things and what we can trend there. Our viewpoint, especially in Southern California, though, is that with kind of the microeconomy that we have with the 2028 Olympics, the expansion of the LA Metro line and all the work that they're doing throughout LA, there's some big projects on the horizon, right? We're just finishing up shortly here, the arena for the football teams in Inglewood, and the Clippers are on their heels with wanting to build a new arena. So LA is certainly has a pipeline of work that's a bit unique to it, I would say. So what we've advised our clients, those that are looking to take a pause, if you will, or find the opportunistic time to buy, is that we really see that the fourth quarter of this year and maybe the first quarter of next year is going to be when you'll find those best buying opportunities, if you will. We don't expect that labor rates will regress. They didn't even do that during the Great Recession, right?
No,
the unions, the tradesmen, they work hard to establish those prevailing wages, and rightfully so. And so they're not going to give back on those. Materials tend to be holding steady. And one of the things I didn't think about when I took that deep dive into aluminum was that with less construction, there's less scrap. And so much of that is recycled. Yes. And so consequently, what they're seeing is with less kind of product coming in to be recycled, the price will dip, but if you look at Shanghai Exchange, it's already pretty much rebounding. China still has aggressive growth targets as well. So they're consuming quite a bit of materials. And so ultimately, and then oil is starting to climb back up, right? We all enjoyed the inexpensive gas there for a while, but it doesn't look like it's here to stay.
No,
so
I don't.
Materials look like they're going to rebound. Labor is going to be, so really it's going to be, right, where subcontract, how hungry they're getting, where they're looking at their profit margins and those sorts of things as
it's definitely
where the adjustment will be.
It's definitely exciting times. It's challenging times over the next 6 to 12 months in California, but it sounds with the pipeline and the big major projects, especially, I mean, you're sitting in a prime location in a great position in a great company in Clark. It sounds as if the next 5 to 10 years is going to be really exciting for you and Clark especially.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going strong with our Los Angeles County Museum of Art project, tearing down the portion of the existing museum, and the new museum, which was designed by Peter Zumthor in Switzerland in conjunction with SOM in New York, is going to span Wilshire Boulevard, the actual display gallery for the museum. So Wilshire is iconic.
I haven't seen the rendering. I look forward to seeing that, yeah.
I encourage you to look at it because there is not a 90-degree angle on the thing. It's all concrete, and it has challenged us. I mean, it's been in project development, in the front end, that project we've spent at least 2.5 years on it, right? We're just now getting into it, so.
Well, that's the one that you want to be speaking to your kids about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Good, Matt. Well, touching on that as well, and kind of different techniques, different models. What is the strangest, the most challenging thing that you've ever been asked to build?
Well, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art is definitely up there, but I certainly wasn't. Again, it takes an army to put something like that together. One of the funnest, most off-the-wall projects that I was involved in was for Google in Boulder, Colorado. Right. And they had taken a big box store, I think it was like a Best Buy or something, that went out of business, 2 stories. And that's where they were going to spearhead their team to develop SketchUp. So this was a while back, right? And that's where they partnered or did SketchUp. So they do a fantastic job of, when they get a big site like that, a big office, of absorbing the local community into the design. So we have in the atrium a 2-story technical climbing wall, rock climbing wall, which I'd never obviously built before. So we subcontracted that out. One of the coolest models to date that I've still seen, because they brought it in, 1/20th scale, and they could take off every part and piece and show you how it was going to attach, and the technical routes that different climbers could take. Wow. They obviously had the full catering kitchen. One of the iconic spots in Colorado is Red Rocks Amphitheater, where everyone from the Beatles to Elvis Presley have played. It's just an amazing spot to take in a concert. But in their kind of mess hall, if you will, open area, they had a full reprographic done of Red Rocks.
Oh, wow.
Back wall, and then they set up kind of a big karaoke stage for their people to just interact and sing and pretend that they were Red Rocks. And then a couple of the things that were really challenging, we had I want to say over 3 miles of climbing rope in the space as kind of a design feature where it would fly. And so this is where we use BIM even early on, missing ductwork and penetrations and those sorts of things would fly around on eyelets throughout the space. And it came down into the middle of a space and created this soft huddle room for them where you kind of parted the ropes to get into it. And then the coup de grace was the Google gentleman running the real estate for him on this project wanted to have a really unique huddle room on the mezzanine top level. And he loved the Volkswagen vans. I don't know if you know the little Volkswagen boxing vans.
Yeah.
Challenged us to find one of those. So we found one, took the engine out, drained the oil out of it, cut out a big section and hoisted it up with a forklift onto that second floor, turned the front seat and the driver's seats around to face the back and put some lighting in, had to drop a sprinkler head into it right through the roof. And that was one of their huddle rooms with the Volkswagen.
Quality.
So, yeah, it was just like anything you could think of, they wanted to challenge us with, and that was fun. I still remember that one.
Yeah, Google, they seem to do that sort of things. I mean, yeah. I would love to actually go and visit that. That'd be nice.
You may be able to find pictures of it. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, make it. And the other thing that I kind of wanted to touch on just before we finish up here now, and it's something that we always kind of ask, especially someone in your position, what would you give your 22, 23-year-old self? Any advice that you would pass down to our younger listeners?
Yeah, and so it's funny because I oftentimes ask my wife this: when did I become the old guy? A lot of the folks on my team are in that age group. My kids are in that age group, so I guess I've got a bit of experience relating and dealing with them. But I would tell them what I tell them now is, again, find something that you're passionate about. If it's the data side of it, if it's design, management, if it's scheduling, whatever it is, find something that gets you up in the morning, that gets you excited to go to work. The other thing I share with them, especially if they're coming from an active college campus or if they're transitioning from the field to the office, is to maintain a healthy physical routine. What we do is stressful, and we're sitting in front of screens all day, and we're in high pressure meetings, and we're making decisions that cost millions of dollars, right? All of that has a tendency to weigh on you. You've got to find a healthy release, so do something, whether it's hiking or riding a bike or just going to the gym regularly. Find a way to get that life balance, work-life balance figured out early on, because if you let it get too far away from you, it's really hard to invent kind of a routine 10, 15 years down the road. So I was fortunate in the fact that I just always, being in Colorado, we were always outdoors and doing something, mountain biking or hiking and that. So that sort of lifestyle has always been, and that's what's appealed to me about Southern California. You can do it year round. So finding that healthy release really, keeps you sharp and energized.
It does. It keeps the mind sharp, especially. I would have a sports background. I would have played professional soccer for about 12 or 13 years. So I always try and keep on top of it. But I find when I don't do that, for instance, during COVID, all I did during COVID was drink tea and eat biscuits. That's all I did, as far as I can see. And it started to get to me. It really, really did. Just mentally, physically, and everything. And until I kind of got out of that and got back into my proper routine, I never felt as sharp. So that's, and I mean, again, especially in the West Coast, I mean, the weather is all about outdoor living as well. And then within Southern California, is there a good community where you live? Because we do relocate a lot of people to that area. What would you recommend? What areas would you recommend? What's good about life in Southern California?
So we've been fortunate. We've lived in northern San Diego County, and now in Orange County, southern Orange County, about 30 miles north of there. But nice. Both coastal communities. The nice thing about that, especially where I'm at now in South Orange County, is I spent most of last summer co-located at SOM's office in downtown LA, pursuing a project for LA County. I could drive 5 minutes to the train station, take the train, which would drop me off in downtown LA, and then take the subway a few stops to get to their office. So, it's tough to deal with that commute. We cover so much ground out here.
Yeah.
So finding a way where, you know, I can be in LA in an hour and a half on the train, but I'm working the whole time, right? I'm usually on a table and accomplishing something there. I'm an hour from San Diego. That's what's really appealing about kind of being where I'm at in Southern Orange County. So working to kind of locate yourself where you can efficiently cover, you know, some of that ground has certainly been a benefit.
Good, good. Delighted. Well, listen, Darrell Torres, thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate your insight. Wishing you and Clark all the best for the next 3 or 4 years. It sounds as if you're going to be a busy man.
We're going to be busy, but really wouldn't have it any other way.
Good, man. Well, listen, we might catch up maybe in 12, 24 months and find out how the projects are progressing and what you're working on next.
Absolutely, would enjoy it.
Thanks, Darrell. Appreciate it.
You bet.